So joining me now is Margaret Kavanaugh. She's actually a reporter up in Hampton Roads at WTKR, the CBS affiliate there. She also has touched on this gruesome case, this horrific case, on her own podcast there at the station True Crime 757. Margaret, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I know, like you, like myself, you followed this case since the inception back in 2019 when there was a nurse at a local hospital there in Chesapeake, Virginia, that started kind of having her antenna go up in regards to the fact that Dr. Jabid Perwaiz was coming in and doing unnecessary surgeries, or too many of them, right? Is that how we kind of learned about the case when it kind of first unfolded?
Yeah, it was complaints that were being made against him. We know that ultimately, I mean, the charges are horrific, unnecessary hysterectomies, telling people they had cancer when they didn't, scaring them into getting surgeries that they didn't need in order to make profits. I mean, it was super disgusting and kind of crazy when all of this first came out.
One of the things about this case too is that he was taking advantage too of those like on Medicaid, right? Talk to me about that.
It was so upsetting. Like, I interviewed a bunch of people. One woman in particular, I went to her house and she was like expressing how she was having such a difficult time financially. They didn't have the money. You know, a lot of people say get a second opinion if you're told. They don't have money to go get second opinions, on these types of things. But there was, I mean, the victim list was very long, and it was a lot of people that were low income that they said in court he could manipulate and kind of take advantage of, knowing that they didn't, have the financial means to really go to anywhere else.
Heartbreaking. This wasn't a new guy that started a private practice. He had been practicing medicine since 1980, came to the United States from Pakistan, opened up this, solo gynecology office in Chesapeake, and he really had a great reputation from what you understand, right?
Yeah, I mean, and these cases were horrifying and shocking, but he has been in the Hampton Roads community for so long that a lot of people went to him and had good experiences. A friend of mine, all of his children were delivered by Dr. Perez, and he didn't have any kind of issue with him and said that all the pregnancies went well. So it wasn't, he was just this doctor doing all this evil. I mean, he was doing good things. He was out in the community and he was very well known. But there was this aspect of doing these unnecessary hysterectomies and surgeries that he ultimately got convicted for. And it was a life sentence when they, gave him the amount of years because he's an older guy.
Yeah, 71, I believe, at the time. And I know, in federal court, I know we couldn't have cameras in there, but just the victims, I mean, we're talking more than 100 here that spoke to the prosecutors, to the jury, to the judge. You talked to a lot of these women. Walk me through some of the things that you heard. And, this is a toll that it will stick with them through their lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, you've gone to the gyno, I've gone to the gyno. You're in a very sensitive situation when someone's helping you medically,
Vulnerable.
vulnerable. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So a lot of these women, oh, it was just, I have chills on my arms just even thinking about the conversations I had with them when they came to understand that they didn't need some of these surgeries. Some of them were still had years, like they could have still had children, but he tied their tubes. He did all kinds of other things in an effort to, what the prosecutors showed was to charge money. Those victims, some of them were crying. Some of them said they talked about hearing that they had cancer when in fact they didn't. I mean, could you imagine? That's crazy to hear
Yeah,
that. And you
it's
really don't.
right. It's unfathomable. So many of them, though, like they're missing, and this can be graphic, but body parts. Like some of them are missing a uterus. Some of them had an unnecessary hysterectomy, missing ovaries. So it's hard to imagine as two females sitting here to be taken advantage of. And as the prosecutor said in federal court that day, this was just greed to fund his lifestyle, right?
Right, right. I mean, the other weird thing about this was that he was doing all these, a lot of them on Saturdays. So, working a lot of times on the weekends, I know in the newsroom, there's way less people here. In the hospitals, there's not all that administration. There's not all those other people. I mean, there are some, but, and I don't understand the workings inside the hospital, but I do know that was a point that was continued, that they continued to make. It was Saturdays. So it was like deliberately scheduling surgeries, and he'd bang out a few on a Saturday. It was like a bunch of them that he'd do. So yeah, I mean, it was just really an unnecessary and sad situation. I mean, he had so much money. He was making a lot of money to begin with. He had got in trouble for tax fraud previously. He was working at Maryview Hospital and they threw him out, got rid of him because of people were complaining about some of the behavior that he was engaging in. So, I mean, this is someone who's had a run in with, behavior that was inappropriate in the past.
And reading some of your notes, in regards to Maryview Hospital, records also say he admitted to having a sexual relationship with a patient back in 1983, but he didn't get in trouble for that. And then a big key point in this is that nonetheless, back in the early 1980s, Chesapeake General Regional, I guess I should say, kind of had some indication that obviously this was going wrong, but then they let him come back, right? Is that my understanding that he kind of got a slap on the wrist and then was still able to come back?
Yeah, he never, from what I saw, got into any major trouble while at Chesapeake Regional. We know that federal prosecutors filed charges against the hospital, which is extremely unusual for that to happen. According to our legal analysts that have looked at this case and kind of examined it, they've basically said in response that they did not do anything wrong and that they were looking forward to their day in court to give their side, but just that they did not, do anything improper. That is what, they have argued from the beginning of when these charges came out. But basically, federal prosecutors are saying that he was working to pump out millions of dollars from insurance companies and the government to get Medicaid and Medicare to, make money for himself and the hospital. That is what they've alleged.
Yeah, so ultimately in this case, the first case, the federal case that went to court, I think back in 2021, like you said, he was convicted on like 59 counts. He's serving more time than he will have in his lifetime, likely to die in jail. Obviously now we're sort of at the 5 year mark of when he was in federal court, and sentenced to more years than is in his lifespan, right? Like he's likely to die in jail. Now you've got a federal case where the hospital is on the other end and prosecutors are coming after the hospital. Bold move. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on there.
Bold move, unusual move. That is what our legal analyst said when he looked at all this, for them to file charges, not for an individual, but for the hospital in general, basically saying that they were making money, he was making money, and that they shouldn't have been allowing all this to go on. They have said that they have a great reputation. I have their statement right here. They have been intricate in the Chesapeake community and the Hampton Roads region, serving nearly 1 million people and 400,000 patients annually. They're dedicated to patient safety, high quality. So they've basically said no, and they said in the beginning they're looking forward to proving that they did not do anything wrong with this. So that case is still unfolding in court, back and forth with lawyers. This stuff takes a very long time. But I know a lot of people are watching it as they saw with the doctor. A lot of people had a lot of questions like, how could this have happened? How could this have happened for so long and to so many people and it not be stopped?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about this case because the two of us combined, gosh, have, decades of experience covering different types of crimes. A lot of times we cover different murders or fires or, we're digging through search warrants. But how would you think that this ranks among some of the stories that you followed or told? Because this one's just a doozy, super unusual.
Super crazy. Like, I guess, and upsetting. That it upset me. And it upset me at the time when I read the allegations. It bothered me every time I went and talked to people that were victims. I remember just feeling sick to my stomach, like the idea of like you go to the gynecologist or you go to your doctor and they're telling you things that are not true or trying to make you their goal to be to have you cut and get surgery or whatever, it's just so horrifying, I think, and just super disgusting that someone would do that to people who are struggling financially in many of the cases. So it was, I mean, when I rank it, it's like, ugh, I never even want to think about it. Like
Yeah.
it was just so sad.
I remember
Especially
too,
with,
one little key piece, and you might remember this too, is like he was even using broken equipment. And we as patients, we're at the mercy of the doctors, right? You believe everything that they say, you're hanging on every word. And so to be taken advantage of, let's not forget all of these women and these females that have been taken advantage of. And now, consequently, are scarred for life.
yeah. There was also information that I thought was crazy, that he had said in some kind of tax issue that he claimed that he bought like a fancy thing to do ultrasounds with or some type of piece of equipment when in fact he had bought himself like a beautiful like Ferrari or some fancy car, and that it came to light that he had lied at some point in his career about that. And I thought, for a
Yeah,
doctor.
yeah, he definitely was like splurging on his fancy lifestyle. But of course, we'd love for you to keep us posted on kind of what plays out in the other federal case against the hospital. But really appreciate you giving us your insight today.